of an ounce each time and then practice the Patronus charm. If you can overcome the potion's effects and successfully cast the spell, dealing with Dementors will be much easier. Derek felt his head spin. Can I even leave the house this Christmas? 4 days before school resumed, Derek finally managed to cast the Patronus charm at the level he had achieved previously. Mrs. Greengrass kept her promise, and the family packed up to spend the final days of vacation in the Alps. It was hard to say how much Derek truly enjoyed the few days of holiday. Despite his mother repeatedly using the happifying charm to counteract the potion's effects, he still had to struggle against sudden bursts of fear while skiing, casting a shadow over his already short vacation. It wasn't until Derek returned to Hogwarts that he felt the potion's lingering effects finally vanish, and his mood lightened completely. On Thursday evening, brimming with renewed energy, Derek went to Lupin's office to request instruction in memory magic. He trusted that, after the recent confidentiality incident, Lupin would agree as long as the magic involved wasn't dark. He had already demonstrated his intelligence and capability, so the teacher wouldn't see him as just a 13-year-old kid. Moreover, sharing a secret naturally strengthened the bond between them. Knocking and entering the office, Derek noticed Lupin wearing the new robe he had given him for Christmas, which gave him added confidence. "Ah, it's you, Derek," Lupin said. "Thank you for the Christmas gift. I'm afraid I don't have anything to give in return. What brings you here?" Derek smiled mischievously. "Actually, you do have a gift to give. I'd like you to guide me in learning some specialized magic." Lupin looked slightly puzzled. "I don't claim to be an expert in defense against the dark arts," Derek said. "I've just traveled a bit and seen more of the world for work experience. If your mother can't solve something, I don't think I can either." "I want to learn legilimency and occlumency," Derek said bluntly. "At Christmas, I asked my mom, and she thought I was too young, that it wouldn't help and would be inefficient. But I still want to learn, so I came to you for help." In fact, he had already asked Claire during the summer, once he realized the truth of the world, but she had flatly refused him. "You're right," Lupin said, giving him a surprised look. "Even as part of aura training, these skills aren't simple. For a minor wizard, practicing them is usually extremely difficult." Derek heard hope in those words. "Ordinary standards for minor wizards aren't really suitable for me," he said calmly. "I believe I can control my own mind." Then he saw Lupin's thoughtful expression and silently thanked Merlin. "Your confidence convinces me. Let's give it a try together." Derek clenched his fist in excitement. "But," Lupin glanced at his watch, "can we do it another day? I've got an appointment at 8. Harry wants to learn how to defend against Dementors." "Patronus?" Derek's heart soared at the very thought. "I found a boggart in Mr. Filch's filing cabinet. Harry is afraid of Dementors right now." "So the boggart can transform into a Dementor," Derek said enviously. "Much better than my method. I've been taking an ounce of fear potion daily over the holidays, and I have to avoid stair shadows upstairs. The fear is uncontrollable." "So have you successfully summoned a Patronus?" Lupin asked. "No, I can only project a shadow," Derek said. "Mom thinks that's enough to handle a single Dementor straying from its post." Lupin nodded. "Exactly. As long as you behave in the castle, encountering a Dementor is extremely unlikely. Mastering the Patronus just ensures absolute safety. So, do you want to see how I teach it? If we have time, we can discuss your other requests afterward." Derek didn't want to wait until the weekend. He'd rather break curfew tonight to learn about memory charms from Lupin, so he nodded without hesitation. At 8, Derek followed Lupin, carrying a large bag, into the History of Magic classroom, where Harry was already waiting. "You're learning to defend against Dementors, too? Hermione said you already know how," Harry asked in surprise. "Oh, I just have some matters to discuss with Professor Lupin, so I came along to listen," Derek said lightly. "I won't interfere with your learning at all." Harry frowned at Lupin, who said nothing and reluctantly lowered his head. "Let's start, Harry." Lupin raised his wand, gesturing for Harry to follow. "I'm about to demonstrate and teach a very advanced spell." Derek tuned out the theoretical explanation he already knew and went to the back of the classroom, giving a few candles arms and legs and making them tap dance. 5 minutes later, the lights around the classroom flickered and went out, and a biting cold swept over everyone. "Expecto Patronum!" Harry shouted. "Expecto Patronum! Expecto Patronum!" Derek turned just in time to see him fall backward, facing upward, as a Dementor silently glided toward him, its glowing, scabbed, decayed hand reaching out slowly. "Professor!" Derek waved his wand to signal Lupin. This was the closest thing to a real Dementor he'd seen since the train. He wanted to practice before the Boggart transformed. Expecto Patronum! A nearly solid shadow shot from the tip of his wand, hitting the Dementor. It staggered back, tripping over its robes. "Careful, careful!" Lupin intervened as the Boggart transformed into a full moon. "I spent a lot of time finding it. Don't destroy it, Derek." Derek shrugged. "Yes, Professor." 3 minutes later, Harry came out of his fear-induced stupor. Derek wondered how this boy would ever defeat Voldemort 4 years later. Right now, he was intimidated even by a Boggart. By Derek's estimation, the replica was only half as powerful as the original. "Sorry," Harry muttered, sitting up and wiping cold sweat from his face. "You okay?" Lupin asked. "I'm fine." Harry managed to lean against a desk. "Eat this," Lupin said, handing him a chocolate frog. "Finish it before we try again. I didn't expect you to succeed the first time. Honestly, I'd be surprised if you did." "This is worse," Harry muttered, biting off the frog's head. I heard her voice louder this time, and his Voldemort. He suddenly stopped, glaring at Derek with a flushed, pale face. Derek realized that revealing his deepest fear to a non-close classmate embarrassed Harry. "It's a bit stuffy in here," Derek said quickly. "I'll step out for a bit and come back." "Wait," Harry called. "We're both students. Can you tell me how you do it? How do you maintain a happy memory in front of a Dementor?" Derek looked at Professor Lupin, whose face was paler than usual and who didn't stop him, and spoke cautiously. "It's a matter of willpower. Dementors amplify negative emotions. You have to find a stronger memory and use all your mental energy to cling to it, resisting despair and fear, refusing to succumb. Basically like that." He left the classroom, giving Harry space to handle his own privacy. Half an hour later, Harry, sweaty and covered in gray dust, came out and waved to Derek, who was sitting on the armor stand. "Professor Lupin says you can go in." Derek noticed Harry looked messy but more spirited. "Seems like you're fired up," Derek said. "Did you manage to resist?" "Got him back into the Boggart successfully," Harry said. "I'm going back to sleep. Good night." Derek stepped into the classroom and noticed that Lupin had dimmed the lights. 2 chairs faced each other in the center of the room, and Lupin was sitting in one, silently gesturing to the other. Derek walked over and sat down. Lupin spoke slowly. "You're very intelligent, Derek," he said. "Occlumency and legilimency are intertwined. Mastering one makes mastering the other much easier. I'm curious, once you've learned legilimency, what do you plan to do with it?" "I intend to use it on myself, Professor," Derek answered honestly. "I want to extract memories I'm about to forget and recall them clearly." "Then we'll start with occlumency," Lupin said without further question. "Managing your mind makes retrieving memories much easier. First, a test. I'll use legilimency on you, and you can only resist with your will. I want to see how strong your mental defenses are so I can tailor a learning plan. Are you ready?" Derek took a deep breath, clearing his mind, and said, "I'm ready." Lupin raised his wand. "Legilimens." The dim classroom blurred and disappeared from Derek's vision. Images flashed through his mind like a movie. He could no longer see anything around him. Days of practicing the Patronus charm in the attic with his father encouraging him, raising his wand at the Dementor on the express, staring blankly at the ceiling in the law office after hearing Hogwarts. A surge of terror gripped his heart. Fear of exposure returned, but just as when resisting the drought of fear, he concentrated, forcing the racing images from his mind. The history of magic classroom returned. Derek knelt on the floor, his knees aching. He looked up at Lupin, who stared back in disbelief. "This is your first time learning occlumency?" Lupin asked, astonished. "Yes. How did I do?" Derek asked, struggling to sit back in the chair, pressing his throbbing temples. "It's late," Lupin said without answering. "Go get some rest. Come back Saturday evening." Derek shook his head. "I feel like I could keep going. Did I not do well just now?" Lupin smiled wryly. "On the contrary, you exceeded all my expectations. How could a beginner have such a stable mind? You practically pushed me out. We'll need a detailed training plan next, and you'll progress very quickly. A week after the second semester began, Ravenclaw faced Slytherin in a Quidditch match. Slytherin won, but the score was close. For Hufflepuff, it was good news. Their lead remained largely unchanged. Cedric kindly kept Quidditch practice to 3 times a week. Combined with Lupin's legitimacy lessons, Derek only had 2 nights a week to himself. Fortunately, his electives were arithmancy and ancient runes, so after homework, he still had time to practice a few extracurricular spells or his favorite transfiguration exercises. Hermione, in contrast, had overloaded her schedule. The weight of her courses was becoming apparent. Every time Derek went to the library, Hermione inevitably appeared in the same section, surrounded by piles of textbooks, arithmancy charts, magical dictionaries, muggle physics diagrams, and mountains of notes. They rarely chatted while working now. She snapped at anyone disturbing her study. "What's this?" One evening, Derek picked up a huge, dusty, worn tome from her stack. Magical Creatures Management Regulations. NET, students won't be tested on this, and even if you wanted to work in the department for the regulation and control of magical creatures, you could learn this on the job. "No," Hermione said firmly, striking the page with her quill. "I'm doing this for Buckbeak." "What kind of magical creature is Buckbeak?" Derek asked. "You should see me doing homework," Hermione said, raising her voice an octave. When Mrs. Finch glanced over, she cleared her throat and lowered her voice. "He's Hagrid's pet and scratched Malfoy in class." "A winged hippogriff. Zacharias mentioned it," Derek said. "Sounds like Hagrid's in trouble. Malfoy doesn't give up easily. You're trying to protect him from punishment?" Hermione slammed her quill down and glared at him irritably. "Listen, if you're just curious, don't ask so many questions. I've been extremely, extremely tired lately." Derek raised an eyebrow. "I'm free right now," he said, pointing at the Transfiguration Compendium he was reading. "Homework's done, no training today, so as a friend, I can help you a bit." Hermione's expression softened. "You're going to help me with Hagrid's case?" Derek nodded. "You look like you could collapse at any moment. I'm not the type to stand by and do nothing. Tell me what's going on. It doesn't sound good if it's already in court." "Yeah," Hermione picked up her quill again, ignoring his first sentence. "Malfoy wants the committee to sentence Buckbeak to death." "Wait, Hagrid's okay?" "Of course he's okay." Hermione shot him a sharp look. "Dumbledore's on it." "Then why are we still sitting here talking?" Derek tossed the old book back on the table, sending up a cloud of dust. "Let's go to the 3rd floor to see Dumbledore. He writes a letter, and the committee won't trouble anyone. This year, Dumbledore is already busy enough with Black, the Dementors, and—" Hermione glanced around and whispered, "and Professor Lupin." Derek smirked. "I bet without Dumbledore, Buckbeak would be dead. Hagrid seems easy enough to handle." "That's exactly why this is our focus," Hermione said firmly. "We need to help Hagrid prepare his defense and counter the committee's arguments." "That's your job," Derek said. "My advice is still to seek help. I can tell Dumbledore trusts Hagrid. It won't take much effort. Schedule a time, explain the situation, have him write a letter, and it's done. You'll feel a lot lighter." Hermione hesitated, then eyed Derek suspiciously. "You're just suggesting this so you don't have to slog through this regulations book yourself, right?" "Yes," Derek admitted frankly. "I suggested it to lighten your burden, not to join you in doing something foolish. Your months of testimony prep aren't going to be as effective as one letter from Dumbledore. I've seen too many cases like that in my mom's office." "Fine," Hermione said after a few minutes, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Thanks for your effortless solution. I'm truly enlightened. Also, even though this is Malfoy's fault, you should advise Hagrid to improve his teaching methods," Derek added. "Leading students to handle dangerous magical creatures without precautions isn't exactly innocent. He's partly responsible. If he keeps doing it this way, trouble will find him again." Hermione set her quill down and glared at him, anger in her voice. If Malfoy had followed Hagrid's instructions and not provoked Buckbeak, he wouldn't be hurt. "I'm not blaming Hagrid entirely," Derek explained patiently. "A teacher needs to be prepared for emergencies in class. Hagrid clearly wasn't ready. Look at Professor McGonagall. She handles every transfiguration mishap without issue." He thought his argument made perfect sense, but Hermione stood up, glaring at him. "Ha! When something goes wrong, you always think you're right, blaming others without looking at your own mistakes. Are all boys like this? She shouted furiously. Then Madam Pince charged over, feather duster raised, her wrinkled face tense. I've been watching for 5 minutes! The library is not a place for loud quarrels, she shrieked. Out, out! It wasn't easy for Hermione. Her bag was huge and heavy, and she was carrying a stack of books. As she stepped out, the bag gave a weary groan, ripped at the bottom, and books spilled everywhere. The library entrance went silent, as if bracing for a storm. Hermione drew her wand and waved it, making the scattered books and papers hover and organize themselves around her. If you want to mock me for ignoring your advice and overloading myself with courses to become neurotic, do it quickly. I need to get back to the common room to finish my homework, she said calmly. Derek stepped in front of her and saw the dark circles under her eyes, her lips trembling, her face pale and worn. I never do anything so uncouth, he said. What I want to do now is drag you up to the tower for some fresh air. Sorry, I can't, Hermione said, lowering her head. Ancient runes and transfiguration homework aren't done. They're due next week. Effortless method number 2. Copy my homework, Derek said. You're exhausted. You need a break. No, Hermione refused. Derek took control of the floating books, sending them to the ceiling far above. Now you have 2 choices, he said. Either come with me to the tower, I'll give you your homework back, and you can continue later, or don't come, and I'll copy my homework for you so you can submit it next week. Hermione pursed her lips, letting tears fall. Tower it is, she said. They walked side by side toward the tower in silence. Derek knew Hermione needed a listening ear more than comforting words. He just waited for her to speak and quietly listened. Under the cold night sky, Hermione rested her arms on the parapet and took deep breaths of the crisp air, tears streaking her cheeks. 5 minutes later, she choked back her words and began to speak. This semester, I've been miserable. 12 classes, so much homework. Hagrid got in trouble, and I have to research for him. Ron and I have been fighting constantly. Now Harry's mad at me about the firebolt. I've been so frustrated, so exhausted, with no one to talk to. Derek listened quietly, making no mention of Harry or the firebolt. Especially Cruikshank, she continued. It's very perceptive. I like it. But no matter how many times I've said this, it still harbors intense hostility towards Scabbers, always trying to attack him. Ron and I have to protect our pets, and now, well, it's just how things are. A cat attacking a rat, what's wrong with that? I don't know what to do. You have too few friends, so every conflict makes you feel isolated, Derek said once she finished. You're close with Harry and Ron, that's fine, but you don't have a female friend you can confide in. All your private thoughts get bottled up, and that weighs heavily. Expand your circle, make more friends of different types. With more people to talk to, you'll feel much lighter. He paused, then added, You're only 13, acting a bit childish, having minor conflicts. That's completely normal. Don't dwell on it. 10 years from now, looking back at these things you care so much about now, you'll probably just laugh. Hermione turned her head, staring at him strangely. What's wrong? Derek asked. Did I say something odd? You're 13 too, Derek, Hermione said. Speaking like some old sage, it's rather amusing. He had almost slipped up about his age. Luckily, it was only Hermione present. If Dumbledore or Claire had been there, they might have noticed. Derek gave an awkward smile. I hope my ridiculousness improves your mood a bit. Feeling better? Thanks, Derek, Hermione exhaled, relieved. I feel much lighter. We should head back before Filch starts causing trouble, and give me my homework back. On the way to the common room, they remained quiet, but the atmosphere was far lighter. When they parted ways on the second floor, Hermione suddenly called after him. Derek, it's a little strange. I noticed Cruikshank seems interested only in Scabbers. The other day I ran into Newman from your house with a mouse in his arms, and Cruikshank didn't even glance at it. Does it only like Scabbers? Also, Ron's mouse has lived a long time. Can magical mice live over 10 years? Well, Derek said, you can ask Hagrid, and I'll ask Lupin. They definitely know a lot about magical creatures. Sounds good, Hermione nodded. After a dizzying whirl, Derek returned from the flood of memories to Lupin's office, finding himself slumped on the floor, soaked in cold sweat. Unlike the first tentative test, Lupin now had a detailed training plan. The invasions of his mind intensified each time, forcing Derek to exert every ounce of willpower just to keep Lupin from crossing dangerous boundaries. As a result, whenever Lupin reached memories tied to past lives, Derek would instinctively push him away completely. When the intrusion stayed within harmless present-life memories, his resistance was often weaker. Inevitably, Derek felt a twinge of disappointment. Since he began learning magic, his grades had always been between excellent and outstanding. Any subject could be mastered with effort. Yet now, just 2 weeks after Lupin had praised his talent, his progress suddenly felt so difficult that he became frustrated with himself. "Have some relaxant. Professor Snape made it," Lupin said, helping him up. "It will ease the headache from training." Derek sat back in his chair, sipped from the goblet, and immediately felt relief. His temples stopped throbbing, and his irritation faded. He hesitated, then decided to be honest with Lupin. "When some memories are touched, my resistance is strong, but with others I can't handle it at all. You've probably noticed." Lupin shook his head. "You've set your goal too high, Derek," he said. "It makes it hard for you to see your progress. In reality, I can feel your resistance strengthening every time. I'm still far from being able to extract memories. For a 13-year-old wizard, strengthening your resistance is already a huge achievement. Many newly recruited Aurors can't manage it," Lupin said, his expression slightly more serious. "But you said the first time that I would progress quickly," Derek muttered, listlessly. "Now it doesn't seem like it at all." Lupin laughed heartily. "Do you always hold yourself to such extreme standards? There are plenty of ministry employees who can't even cast a simple iron armor charm. I'd wager that among all the students at Hogwarts, you're the only one who's mastered the mind-shielding spell. Isn't that fast progress?" "Success feels so far away," Derek grumbled. "No matter the pace, it always seems slow to me." "I have complete confidence in you. At this rate, you'll be ready to attempt memory extraction by 6th year at the latest. That's extraordinary." "One step at a time," Lupin said with a smile. "Now, want a bottle of butterbeer?" He pulled 2 bottles from the cupboard. "Thanks." Derek took a big sip and asked, "Once the holidays start, how should I practice on my own?" "Mastering mind shielding is a long-term process," Lupin explained. "Targeted intrusion and resistance will get you started. Then it's about consistent daily practice, clearing your mind, burying emotions and memories at the deepest level. Over time, your control strengthens, and you'll be able to actively browse your memories, ultimately achieving your goal." "I understand," Derek said thoughtfully, asking no further questions. They drank their butterbeer in silence, no other topics discussed. This had been their routine for the past 2 weeks. Outside of study, they rarely exchanged personal details. Derek never asked about Lupin's past or what happened during full moons. Lupin showed no curiosity about Derek's mostly forgotten but troubling memories. Whenever a memory surfaced that might trigger a strong reaction in Derek, Lupin immediately withdrew. They respected each other's privacy, forming a quiet, unique friendship. Lupin was the 3rd friend Derek had made since arriving in England. Few words, but a deep understanding. "I should head back to the common room," Derek said, checking his pocket watch. "Good night, Professor Lupin." He stood, then remembered Hermione and sat back down. "One question unrelated to mind shielding, Professor," he said. "You've seen many magical creatures. Do rats ever live more than 10 years? In the Muggle world, they usually live only about 3. "I haven't personally seen a rat live 10 years, Lupin said, "but it's entirely possible. For instance, the Forbidden Forest has many magical plants. If a rat accidentally consumes the right combination, its lifespan could be extended, though that's rare. What's the specific situation?" "Ron has a rat, Scabbers," Derek explained. "He's been at the Weasley home for at least 10 years, starting as Percy's pet and later given to Ron. This year, Hermione got a cat, Crookshanks, who frequently attacks Scabbers. That's why Hermione asked me to consult you." "Anything else?" Lupin asked. "Well, Scabbers is missing a toe in his front paw, and Crookshanks only targets him, ignoring other rats," Derek added. Lupin spread his hands. "Sorry, Derek. I don't have an explanation either. Magic often holds mysteries we can't account for. Perhaps it's just a miracle." The next morning, Derek met Hermione outside the Great Hall. "What did Professor Lupin say?" Hermione asked hopefully. "Is Scabbers' condition normal?" No, Derek replied. Lupin thinks it's a miracle, rare, but not impossible. Hermione looked disappointed. Hagrid said the same thing, she yawned. I'll just go back to the dorm and tie Crookshanks up so Ron doesn't start arguing with me again. Wait, I have an idea, Derek suggested. If we can't find anything unusual about Scabbers, maybe we should look for something unusual about Crookshanks instead. Hermione's eyes widened. Crookshanks is clever, she said through gritted teeth. He wouldn't attack Scabbers for no reason. Scabbers must be hiding something. Don't be stubborn with me. I'm trying to solve the problem, Derek said calmly. Hogwarts is full of magic. Maybe Crookshanks encountered something, or Scabbers did. Let's cast tracking spells, observe their habits, and maybe we'll discover the trigger. All right. Hermione thought for a moment before agreeing. I'll figure out a spell for Crookshanks. As for Scabbers, well, Ronald probably thinks I want the rat dead now too. Enough already. Watching Hermione rush upstairs, Derek felt amused. In his eyes, this was typical childlike stubbornness, neither willing to give in, leading to conflicts and fights that either resolve with stronger friendship or end in complete fallout. Given the current situation, Derek thought the latter was more likely. Faced with uncertainty, Hermione preferred to believe magic was influencing Crookshanks rather than accept a cat's natural predatory instincts. Then, still oblivious to the fact she was a child herself, she walked into the great hall, frustrated, hands on her forehead. Damn missed breakfast. What really amazed Derek was Hermione's behavior in class. During History of Magic, Professor Binns droned on as usual. Most students nodded off. Derek, as usual, practiced transfiguration when Ernie poked him. Aren't you sleeping? Derek asked irritably. The essay's in my bag. If you want to copy it, get it yourself. No, look at Granger, Ernie said. Derek quickly scanned the classroom and found Hermione in the back row, flipping through several thick books, completely ignoring Professor Binns at the podium. Nothing surprised him more than this. Hermione Granger had set aside her thirst for studying. She didn't sit in the front row, didn't pay attention in class, and didn't even take notes. It was almost unimaginable. He immediately realized this probably had something to do with the tracking spell she mentioned earlier, and couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and disbelief. You're close with Granger, right? Ernie whispered, while Justin nodded desperately beside him. Can you persuade her to pay attention in class? A lot of students in our year rely on her notes to pass exams. If she tunes out too, we're in real trouble this year. Derek replied slowly, No, not even Merlin could stop her, let alone me. At dinner, Hermione rushed to the Hufflepuff table while Derek was eating a chicken pie. Please, tell me this isn't true, he managed to say, swallowing with effort. I just suggested it this morning, and by tonight you've already mastered a tracking spell? That's a 6th-year spell. I didn't have time to learn the tracking spell, Hermione said anxiously. But I found another way. Can we go outside? Quickly. Derek could only follow her out of the great hall to the stone steps at the main entrance. Hermione drew her wand and pointed it at the ground. Moonlight manifest? A faint silver glow appeared at the tip of her wand, illuminating the floor just enough to reveal a clear paw print. I mixed purple maple dew with evening primrose juice and applied it to Crookshanks' paws during its bath. Hermione's eyes sparkled. Then, under the moonlight, Crookshanks' footprints appear on the ground, Derek said. Impressive. You've circumvented every obstacle. Hermione smiled, a little embarrassed. I followed the trail from the 8th floor to here, and then Crookshanks left, she explained. It's probably not curfew yet, but the teachers wouldn't allow us outside the castle anyway. So you want me to come with you and see where Crookshanks went? As Derek and Hermione walked across the grounds, the sun had already dipped behind the forbidden forest, casting its last rays on the treetops and painting the horizon a muted orange. Can we speed up a bit? Derek turned. After all, this post-dinner walk was your idea. I'm not used to it, Hermione frowned. This cold chill is really uncomfortable. We have to use the disguise charm, Derek explained. If anyone sees us, 50 points deducted would be light. You don't want to get Gryffindor in trouble, right? And we should return before dark. The risk of encountering Dementors increases at night. Hermione shivered violently. Even through the disguise charm, Derek could see her face turn pale. This isn't real, right? Professor Dumbledore wouldn't allow them into the school grounds, she asked nervously. I'd like to believe that, but low probability events can still happen. We need to be careful, Derek said, using the silver glow from his wand to track the footprints. Don't worry too much. My Patronus is strong enough to protect us. Encountering one or two Dementors won't be too dangerous. That reassurance seemed to ignite Hermione's courage. She quickened her pace, running past Derek and taking the lead to follow the footprints. This isn't like you, Hermione said. Last time, when we went to Professor Lupin's office, you were so cautious about the Obliviate spell. How come today you're risking it and just coming out with me? Derek shrugged helplessly. I did make some preparations, he said, pointing to the sky. You start ahead, and I've summoned Panda. If we run into danger, it'll go back to the castle and alert the teachers. The owl in flight saw Derek's gesture and let out two excited hoots. Hermione's expression darkened, her eyes narrowing at him. Sorry, Derek said quickly. I'm not trying to mock or show off. I just have a habit of being prepared. It's safer that way. Hermione snorted loudly and quickened her pace. They walked for another 5 minutes, the dim orange light fading as darkness wrapped around them. They had to cooperate. Derek handled illumination, while Hermione used the moonlight to track footprints. You're really skilled at transfiguration, Hermione glanced at the glowing orb above them. You can use Lumos flicker like this? Last summer I discovered 6 different variations of the Lumos charm at home, Derek said proudly. I can lend you my research notes. Wait. Suddenly, Hermione grabbed him, her expression deadly serious. Where are we? Have we arrived? Derek asked again. We can't go any further. Hermione's voice trembled slightly. It's dangerous ahead. 2 years ago, Harry and Ron came here. They nearly didn't make it out alive. Derek waved his wand, sending the light orb forward. He saw a thick tree trunk, a massive tree with branches as thick as serpents, hanging low and swaying slightly. You must know its name, Hermione added. It's called a humping willow, extremely violent. Last term, Harry and Ron missed the train, drove the car here, and crashed into it. She shivered and fell silent. Derek stepped forward a few meters, and the humping willow immediately shook dangerously. A branch whipped toward him. Protego! An invisible barrier sprang up, blocking the branch. It held for a second, then shattered. Derek jumped back to safety. What are you doing? Hermione shouted angrily. Looking to get yourself killed? Professor Lupin said last time they planted a humping willow at the secret passage to the Shrieking Shack to protect others. Derek wiped sweat from his brow. So Crookshanks went into that passage? Hermione glared at him, signaling him to freeze. Silver light flared from her wand tip, illuminating a few footprints near the tree roots. It's too dangerous. We can't go any further, she said firmly. I don't think this is Crookshank's first time here, but there's nothing inside. Last time during the Hogsmeade weekend, I visited the Shrieking Shack. Just dust and trash, Derek pondered. What attraction could a decades-abandoned house have for a cat? That's something you can ask Professor Lupin, Hermione said. Right now, we need to get back to the castle. It's getting late. On the quiet way back, Derek and Hermione repeatedly discussed Crookshanks and the Shrieking Shack, but gained nothing. As they reached the stone steps, Filch was closing the doors. Bloody hell, Derek muttered. I'm not sleeping on the lawn. Hermione panicked. Do something, Derek. Do something, she whispered. If Lavender and the others don't see me sleeping, they'll tell Professor McGonagall. Ernie and Justin would do the same, Derek said calmly. But I haven't learned the Confundus or Trust charms yet. You want me to use the stunning spell? I bet if we did, the whole school would be inspected again tomorrow. They fell silent, frantically recalling suitable spells. Derek could almost hear their brains buzzing. I can't think of anything, Derek said dryly as the door nearly closed. Why don't we just walk past and say we lost track of time at the Black Lake? Detentions and points aren't that bad. We could earn them back in a week with our grades. Hermione kicked him hard. Stop talking nonsense. Think. Ouch! Derek yelped in pain. What's that sound? Filch called out sharply. Is someone there? Who's there? He approached, lantern in hand. No, Hermione whispered, nearly in tears. Professor McGonagall will be furious. Derek ignored her, seizing a fleeting thought of a light spell, and guided Hermione back into the shadows. What are you doing? Hermione whispered. I am not staying outside the castle all night. What if Dementors show up? Shh. Derek covered her mouth and whispered, Don't make a sound, don't move. The disillusionment charm isn't over yet. He won't see us easily. They circled slowly in the dark, sneaking in from the side. Filch stood in the spot they just vacated, lantern swaying as he scanned the area. I'm such an idiot, Derek muttered once inside. 10 years a wizard, and I nearly forgot the old family trick of diversion. Totally unforgivable. Hermione kicked him again, and Derek realized he still had his hand over her mouth. He quickly let go. Sorry, that was intense, he said immediately. You okay? Hermione exhaled, cheeks flushed, and kicked him a third time. Then, curiosity overcoming her caution, she asked, What did you just say? Was that the pronunciation of an ancient spell? Ah, that! Derek hesitated. After the thrill, he'd instinctively blurted out an idiom. Unable to explain, he just made something up. It's a saying I learned in Chinatown from some Chinese folks. It means good luck. Now, what do you want to do? Return to the common room or go see Lupin? Of course we're going to Professor Lupin, Hermione said, refocusing. There are details he hasn't told me. I need to find out what's really in the shrieking shack. It's curfew now, Derek reminded her. Getting caught could have serious consequences. Hermione hesitated for a moment, then nodded firmly. No problem. We've still got the disillusionment charm on us. Compared to the narrow escape at the main gate, the journey to Professor Lupin's office on the 4th floor felt far more reassuring. Most of the portraits Dumbledore had promised to monitor the corridors were asleep. A few would murmur softly at the fleeting blur of movement across their frames, then return to slumber. Lupin looked genuinely surprised at their post-curfew visit. If I'm reading the time right, you should be in the common room by now. Is something urgent? Hermione spoke quickly. Professor, Derek told you yesterday that my cat Crookshank had some trouble with Ron's rat, Scabbers. Today we followed Crookshank and discovered it went. Wait. Lupin's brows furrowed sharply as he looked down at the mud and grass debris at their feet. Just now you broke school rules and safety measures to leave the castle and follow a cat across the grounds? Hermione's face flushed crimson, and her gaze dropped, as if she had suddenly developed a keen interest in the specks of dirt between the stones. And you, Derek, Lupin turned to him. I would have thought your mind would at least signal a warning for such reckless behavior. Apparently, it did not. Do you realize, Lupin's voice rose, that this term, the entire school has been making efforts to ensure student safety? What you just did undermines all of that work. Facing Lupin's stern gaze, Derek suddenly felt all his pride in his magical skills and careful preparations vanish. Here was a teacher truly concerned for student safety, scolding them for their recklessness. No matter the reason, they had endangered others and owed an apology. I'm sorry, Professor Lupin, Derek said earnestly. Our actions were reckless and thoughtless. We were wrong. Lupin studied them in silence for several minutes. Derek felt the weight of his age advantage evaporate, leaving him small and insignificant. Hermione let out a soft sob. All right, sit down, Lupin said, pulling out 2 chairs. Whatever brought you to me must be serious. Sit and tell me everything. Crookshank went to the Humping Willow and vanished at the roots. It entered the secret passage you mentioned, Derek said concisely once seated. How did Crookshank know the passage existed, and why go through it to reach the Shrieking Shack? Remember, I was there before Christmas. Aside from dog prints, it was just garbage and dust. Lupin sprang to his feet, staring at Derek so intently it made them jump. A dog? His voice was hoarse. Are you certain the prints were from a dog? Yes, they were fairly large, Derek replied, puzzled. Is there a problem, Professor? Lupin sank back into his chair, pressing his hand over his face, silent for a long moment. Professor? Professor? Hermione asked, worried. I don't want to lie, Lupin said weakly through his fingers. I can only tell you that Crookshank may be connected to Sirius Black. Hermione let out a sharp gasp. Black? But how is that possible? She clutched her face in terror. Why would Black use dark magic to control Crookshank? What would manipulating a cat to hunt a rat accomplish? The rat, Ron's rat, Scabbers. Lupin lifted his head, his expression a tangled mix of disbelief, fear, and anguish. The one that's over 10 years old, missing a toe? As he spoke, his face revealed a complexity of emotions Derek had never seen on anyone before. Expectation, fear, pain, and doubt all interwoven. Yes, Hermione answered cautiously. Ever since I got Crookshanks this year, Scabbers' condition has been deteriorating. Lupin looked as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. His eyes were dull, the wrinkles on his face deepened, and he leaned on the desk to stand, as if all his energy had been drained. I can't say much more, he said warily. Even I haven't reached a definite conclusion. I need to take you to see Professor Dumbledore. Perhaps he can help. But Crookshanks, it's innocent. Hermione's words stumbled out, her face scratched in streaks, confusion and worry etched across her features. Is it really that serious? Lupin nodded gravely. Derek frowned. He hadn't expected that investigating a single cat could be tied to Black and Black to Harry Potter, meaning his inadvertent actions were somehow entangled in this year's main storyline. You know Black, right? He asked directly. Does this have anything to do with his betrayal of the Potters? Lupin and Hermione exchanged surprised glances. That's not hard to find out, Derek said calmly. My mother could look into it through her connections. You're correct, Lupin nodded again. But I want to discuss the details in Dumbledore's office. The connections here are very complicated. Hermione hesitated. But this involves Harry, she said cautiously. He has the right to know, should we bring him along? No, Lupin said firmly. We haven't reached a definite conclusion yet. Including Harry would be unwise. Let's go. When they arrived at the headmaster's office on the 3rd floor, Dumbledore was still awake. Surprisingly, Snape was there as well. Their visit had clearly interrupted a private conversation. Remus, and Mr. Greengrass and Miss Granger, Dumbledore's silver beard quivered slightly. A late-night visit. What brings you here? Snape interjected, his dark eyes narrowing. What I find curious, he said softly, is why Granger and Greengrass are out past curfew. When did Hufflepuff and Gryffindor become so friendly? With me leading, that's no longer an issue, Severus, Lupin replied stiffly. I'm here to report some important matters to Professor Dumbledore. Then I shall leave you the space, Snape said, almost conciliatory. The potion is still in the cauldron. It will soon be the full moon, and I must finish it. Severus, Dumbledore called sharply. Snape said nothing further and walked out, a breeze trailing from the hem of his cloak. I think your presence will be very helpful in this discussion, Lupin suddenly called after him. Could you stay and assist us, Severus? Derek and Hermione exchanged astonished glances. Snape paused at the doorway, expression unreadable, and looked to Dumbledore for approval. Then let's make it an evening tea session, Dumbledore said cheerfully, Lysiski waving his wand. 2 comfortable chairs appeared, and 3 steaming teacups materialized on the table. Please sit. Make yourselves at ease. Derek sat between Lupin and Hermione, holding his teacup, waiting for Lupin to begin. Lupin remained silent, seemingly organizing his thoughts, the 4 of them watching him quietly. I only decided to visit 10 minutes ago, Lupin finally said. Honestly, Professor Dumbledore, my mind is a mess. I don't even know where to start. Snape, seated to Lupin's left, snorted derisively. Take your time, Remus. No need to rush, Dumbledore said kindly. I may be old and have trouble sleeping at night, but Severus is in his prime. As for our 2 young students, he winked at Derek and Hermione, I'm sure they are very eager. We have the whole evening. After another 5 minutes of silence, Lupin spoke again. Professor Dumbledore, I believe Sirius Black may be hiding in the Shrieking Shack. The statement sent a shockwave through the office. The portraits that had been asleep stirred, watching intently. Dumbledore's smile vanished. Snape reacted most strongly. Derek saw his hand slip inside his robes, likely grasping his wand. Very interesting, Remus, Snape hissed. I notice you've started using his name again. Are you trying to help him finish the work he left incomplete 13 years ago? Silence, Severus, Lupin said, eyes flashing with danger. A faint lupine shadow crossed his face, and Derek felt Hermione clutch his arm. Let me finish before you comment. Lupin paused again. Derek, please explain your thoughts, Lupin said, looking at him. Snape let out a sharp, low laugh. Start from the evening's adventure. Derek shifted awkwardly. I'll start from the beginning of term. Hermione got a cat this year, Crookshanks. Ron has a rat named Scabbers. Crookshanks shows intense aggression towards Scabbers, but ignores other rats, which caught Hermione's attention. Snape's face showed impatience. We discovered that Scabbers has lived in the Weasley household for at least 10 years, an unusually long lifespan for a magical rat. But after consulting Professors Lupin and Hagrid, we found no definite explanation. So we turned our attention. The trail led us to Crookshanks. Tonight we followed him out of the castle, down to the Humping Willow, and saw him enter the passage leading to the Shrieking Shack. That's why we came to see Professor Lupin. Hermione and I still don't fully understand what's going on. After speaking, Derek awkwardly rubbed his nose. It was embarrassing to recount their rule-breaking adventures to the current headmaster and a circle of past ones. He glanced at Hermione and saw her head lowered, cheeks flushed. Dumbledore, however, showed no sign of disapproval, his blue eyes sparkling. "So, you already know Professor Lupin's identity, yes?" Hermione nodded. Derek remained still. "You chose to keep it secret. That was not easy," Dumbledore said solemnly. "I am deeply grateful for your trust in both Professor Lupin and me." Snape rocked his chair back and forth, the scraping sound harsh in the silence. "I think we can let this trivial matter go," he said darkly. "Focus on the point of our discussion. Black. Everyone here already knows the Shrieking Shack's past purpose." Lupin took up the explanation. "During the Hogsmeade weekend before Christmas, Derek noticed dog prints on the floor while visiting the shack. Coupled with Crookshank's unusual behavior, I immediately realized that Sirius might be hiding inside and influencing the cat." Disgust contorted Snape's face as he sprang to his feet. "If it weren't for your delay, werewolf, we'd have caught Black already. What are we waiting for, Dumbledore?" Dumbledore raised a hand to stop him, looking genuinely puzzled. "Can someone explain why dog prints would be linked to Sirius Black?" "Here's the situation, Professor." Lupin bowed his head, guilt heavy in his tone. "Back then, to help me, they all became animagi. James was a stag, Sirius a dog, Peter a rat. They didn't stay in the house. They often roamed the grounds in Hogsmeade." Derek and Hermione were stunned. "You were friends with Harry's father, too?" Hermione exclaimed. "No wonder you taught him the Patronus charm so well." "Such touching friendship," Snape sneered loudly, robe swaying. "3 animagi and a werewolf, 2 dead, 1 a fugitive, leaving only you." "Lupin, what do you make of that friendship?" Hermione shot him a glare. "Severus!" Dumbledore's voice rang unusually high, his blue eyes severe. "Take care." Reluctantly, Snape sat back, black eyes full of resentment. Silence settled over the office. Lupin buried his face in his hands as if to stay that way for eternity, offering penance to Dumbledore. Derek suddenly understood Lupin's earlier distress and broke the silence. "You didn't rush to the shack with Professor Dumbledore because you discovered something new, right? Scabbers, the long-lived rat, isn't simple. He must be connected to Peter." Half a minute later, Snape sneered. "Nonsense, Greengrass. Linking a long-lived rat to animagi? I doubt how you even mastered the subtle art of potions." "Derek isn't imagining things. Scabbers is the key," Hermione said boldly, meeting Snape's gaze. "Black influenced Crookshanks to attack Scabbers, who is unusual, over 10 years old, missing a toe. And back then, the largest remnant of Peter found was his finger," Dumbledore said softly. "Black controlled Miss Granger's cat, meeting it periodically, trying to kill a rat, one that matched Peter's characteristics. Is that what you're suggesting, Remus?" Dumbledore's question pulled Lupin from his guilt, and he lifted his head, voice hoarse. "Yes, Professor Dumbledore. I believe the case is full of doubts. If Peter didn't die but lived as a rat for 13 years, the role he played." It was as if 4 poorly brewed potions sat before Snape. His face turned iron gray. "You trust this werewolf's baseless claims, Dumbledore?" He spat, eyes wild. "Peter Pettigrew has been dead for 13 years. What we should do is catch Black in that cursed house, not indulge in speculation here." "With respect, Professor Snape, you are the most emotionally unstable person in this room," Derek said calmly. "With so many anomalies, can it really be called baseless?" Dumbledore's calm voice shielded Derek from Snape's wrath. "All right, this is admittedly difficult to accept," Dumbledore said, resting his hands in a tower-like formation on the desk, his blue eyes sharp and piercing. "Even with my experience, I was shocked and found it absurd. But on reflection, many of the unresolved questions from over a decade ago resonate with what's happening now. For instance, Black never showed signs of betrayal before. His betrayal of the Jameses was sudden. Of course, I'm not claiming he is entirely innocent." He added that quickly, noting the sharply contrasting expressions of Snape and Lupin. Now, we have 2 tasks to complete, Dumbledore continued clearly and firmly. The first, Remus, I entrust to you. I want you to search for Black in the Shrieking Shack, Hogsmeade, the Hogwarts grounds, and the Forbidden Forest. Speak with him. As an old friend, he won't flee from you. Have him explain his intentions and what truly happened all those years ago. The second task, Severus, tomorrow morning, accompany me to the Gryffindor table to observe the long-lived rat of the Weasley household. If Scabbers isn't truly a rat, no transfiguration, however powerful, will escape our notice. Snape bristled with barely contained anger, teeth clenched, but like Lupin, he had no choice but to nod and accept the assignment. At that moment, voices came from outside, and a few seconds later, Professors McGonagall and Sprout pushed the door open. Albus, 2 students are missing, McGonagall said, clearly anxious. Miss Granger of Gryffindor and Mr. Greengrass of Hufflepuff after dinner. Then she noticed Derek and Hermione glancing back. Derek felt a pang of unease. Hermione shrank slightly. What on earth are you 2 up to? McGonagall's nostrils flared. Vanishing from the dormitories past curfew, terrifying your classmates and us in the process. Minerva, Pomona, calm yourselves, Dumbledore hurried to reassure them. All evening, Mr. Greengrass and Miss Granger were with me, chatting. Later, Severus and Remus joined us. Tea ran long, and we lost track of time. That's a relief. That's a relief, Sprout said, still panting, clearly having run some distance. We saw you leave the Great Hall and rushed to find you. Thank heavens you were with the headmaster. I thought, Black, Dementors. Derek and Hermione exchanged guilty glances, immediately springing from their chairs. McGonagall, still unsettled, scrutinized them carefully a few more times before her breathing evened out, then issued a stern warning. Young lady, young man, this year is exceptional. From now on, for any important matters, ensure your friends know your whereabouts in advance. Yes, Professor McGonagall, they replied in unison. Derek understood that both McGonagall and Sprout remained suspicious, but since Dumbledore had vouched for them, they chose to trust him. Your house mistresses are here. Let them escort you back to your dorms to rest, Dumbledore said, his gaze serious. Although I'm confident you understand the importance of our conversation, I must emphasize secrecy. This is your task alone, and I trust you can accomplish it. McGonagall raised an eyebrow, giving them a skeptical look, then said nothing further. She and Sprout led the way out of the office. Derek and Hermione followed in single file, only managing a hurried good night to each other before quickly being escorted back to their respective dorms. The events of just 5 or 6 hours had been nothing short of thrilling. Derek had felt exhausted, expecting to sleep soundly until morning. But after dealing with the curiosity of his roommates, he tossed and turned, unable to rest, his mind tangled with countless thoughts. Undoubtedly, his inadvertent involvement had directly altered the plot that was supposed to unfold this year. He realized just how much impact a single butterfly could have. Helping Hermione with a pet dispute had the power to completely rewrite the original storyline. When his brain-shielding skills matured and he recalled all memories of Harry Potter's world, what would he do? Aid the protagonist in defeating the big bad, or watch the story unfold before slipping away to America, avoiding unnecessary trouble? Derek felt a pang of regret for coming to Hogwarts, but soon a flood of inexplicable emotions overtook him, and he spent the night in a daze. The next morning, sleepless, Derek arrived early on the first floor, only to find Hermione, bearing the same large dark circles, pacing and waiting for Ron Weasley to enter the Great Hall. They forced a smile at each other, a mere greeting, then sat at their respective tables, eating breakfast absent-mindedly. 15 minutes later, Ernie stepped up to Derek, righting his cup to prevent him from spilling milk over his robes. "What happened?" Ernie asked, concern in his eyes. "After dinner, you went out with Granger, and Professor Sprout brought you back at dawn. No points were deducted, but something feels off. Aren't you going to tell us?" "I can't say much," Derek replied casually, cutting into his now crumbling pie for the 4th time. "You'll see soon enough." "See what?" Ernie and Justin asked in confusion. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the Gryffindor table. Hermione swept 3 plates onto the floor, her gaze fixed on the doorway. Following Hermione's line of sight, Derek saw Ron and Harry entering the Great Hall together, noting a bulge in Ron's jacket pocket that quivered constantly. At the teacher's table, Dumbledore and Snape stood and began walking toward them. Derek immediately rose and moved to a vantage point near the entrance, watching the hall. Harry and Ron froze, startled by the approach of the duo. "Professor Dumbledore," Ron stammered, Is there something wrong? Are you looking for Harry?" "Mr. Weasley, we have some questions regarding your rat," Dumbledore said, peering down at them. "May we see it?" The bulge in Ron's jacket quivered even more. "I don't quite understand," Ron said quickly, glancing at Hermione beside the table. His freckled face flushed. "You mean you want to see Scabbers?" "Your ears aren't failing you, Weasley," Snape said sharply, drawing his wand and pointing it at him. "I expect your intellect is functioning as well. Hand over your rat. Now." The doorway became the center of attention in the hall. Everyone stood on their chairs, watching the four of them. "I'm not." Ron's face turned as bright as his hair, stubbornly declaring, "Hermione sent you, didn't she? I absolutely." Sizzle. Ron's pocket split open, and Scabbers shot down his clothes with incredible speed. In the next instant, Dumbledore drew his wand as well. Scabbers shrieked, suspended in midair, all four paws twisting and struggling frantically. "Oh, this is far too obvious." Dumbledore lifted Scabbers to eye level, his blue eyes fixed unblinkingly on him, while Harry struggled to hold back Ron from rushing forward. "All these years, I never realized. Severus, stay back!" Dumbledore's warning came too late. Snape's face contorted, his wand glowing with a blue-white light. The little black body twisted wildly. Ron yelled. The rat fell to the floor. A dazzling flash erupted, and then it was like watching a tree grow and fast forward. A head appeared on the ground, limbs extended, and moments later a man stood where Scabbers had been, wringing his hands nervously. The great hall erupted in gasps. The man was short, his sparse pale hair in disarray, a bald patch atop his head. He looked as if he had recently lost a significant amount of weight, his dirty skin almost matching Scabbers' fur. His pointed nose and beady, wet eyes still held the characteristics of a rat. He glanced at Dumbledore, appearing on the verge of fainting. Snape's cold, hate-filled voice announced the man's identity to the students. "Peter Pettigrew!" The murmurs buzzed through the hall. Aside from the two who knew the truth, every student was stunned by the transformation from rat to human, paying little attention to the name Snape had spoken. The professors, however, were visibly shaken. Professor McGonagall clutched her chest, struggling to breathe. Professor Sprout dropped her fork with a loud clatter. Professor Flitwick let out an incredulous scream and toppled from his chair. But none of this matched the storm of emotions crossing Harry's face. Shock and fear, shifting to disbelief as if everyone were playing a cruel joke, and finally, utter confusion. "Professor Dumbledore, it's not April Fool's Day, is it?" Harry stared at the trembling Peter Pettigrew. "I don't understand. Why would you turn Scabbers into a human and his name, Peter Pettigrew?" Then the weight of the name hit him, and he shouted, "That's not funny at all. He's dead." Ron now held Harry back, as it seemed he was about to lunge at Dumbledore to grab his beard. Surprisingly, Snape, who usually delighted in mocking Harry, remained perfectly still, expressionless. His hollow eyes moved his wand, summoning invisible chains from the air that held Peter Pettigrew's limbs tightly, suspending him midair. "Dumbledore," Snape said flatly, "we should relocate." "Professor, please tell me," Harry trembled. "Please tell me what's going on. Why did Ron's rat turn into—" Dumbledore's mouth twitched. He placed a firm hand on Harry's shoulder, his blue eyes behind half-moon spectacles sincere. "I'm sorry, Harry. This matter is still shrouded in mystery. I've only managed to piece together a few threads, but I promise, once the truth is clear, you will know immediately." With that, he and Snape hurriedly left the Great Hall with Peter. Harry remained, his gaze sweeping across the professors. The remaining three heads of houses all looked down, avoiding his eyes. Frustrated, he let out a loud yell, startling everyone. Ron stumbled back, visibly frightened. "Harry!" Hermione hurried over, glancing pleadingly at Derek. "Come on, let's go outside and talk, okay?" She tugged both boys out of the hall. "Wow, that was insane," Ernie said excitedly from behind, looping an arm around Derek's neck. "A pet rat turning into a human? The Weasleys are impressive. How did you know ahead of time?" "Ernie, that's not funny," Hannah retorted. That has to be an illegal animagus. Professor McGonagall said it's extremely dangerous magic. It could go horribly wrong. That's not the point, Susan frowned. Professor Snape said the man's name is